Two new scenarios are dropping inside of Once Human. One of them is called Raid Zone, and the other one is called Endless Dream. These are being packaged together in Once Human's annual version 2.0 update, which they are calling Dreamvale, and is going to be launching on July 2nd. If you don't know, Once Human is a massive multiplayer online survival game very similar to Dune Awakening. However, inside of Once Human, the PvE is head and shoulders above what you have inside of Dune Awakening. As you can see in the background, some of the bosses and the enemies that you can fight are just absolutely insane. I really had a wild time playing this game when it first launched. This upcoming update has actually flown way under my radar. There's been some early access testing with both the Raid Zone and the Endless Dream scenario that's been going on. But today we're just going to briefly break down exactly what's going on with these two scenarios in the upcoming July 2nd full release. If this video helps you out at all, then help me out by hitting that like button. But let's go ahead and cut this plug and jump right on into it. Starting off here, the Endless Dream scenario is going to be their new PvE scenario, and then Raid Zone is going to be their new PvP scenario. Personally, in Once Human, I never really enjoyed the player versus player. There's a lot of like exploiting and hacking going on. Let me know down in the comments if that's gotten any better. But the PvE inside of Once Human is definitely something to experience. So let's go ahead and start off with the Endless Dream scenario. To start off here inside of the Endless Dream, you're going to have full access to the entire map. They say that all of the existing regions are going to be accessible in Phase 1. If you haven't played Once Human at all before, typically the regions are kind of like time-gated in their unlocks. It's just a bit weird. So it's nice to see that actually inside of this Endless Dream scenario, we're gonna have full map access. As to exactly what that's going to do to the early game of Once Human, I'm not sure. You're probably still better off, clearing the first sections of the map before moving into the later sections. But you're also going to have something inside of this scenario called Dream Zones. And these are layers of nested dream zones that encroach upon the wilderness, each featuring unique environmental traits and combat effects. As you venture into the nightmares, their effects stack and multiply, and as a metahuman, your mission is to purify these layered zones to reshape the environment and its rules. Construction is possible inside of Dream Zones even without a territory terminal, allowing you to unleash your creativity and overcome the nightmare by any means possible. Building anywhere inside of a specific area can lead to some insane things. If you guys remember fighting off the big bosses in those raid zones, I forget what they were called. You would walk up to those areas and all of the builds would just start loading in that were meant to be like defenses to blocking off the big boss. It definitely led to some insanity. So I'm excited to see what this ends up looking like. But they also talk about how the scenario is going to play out with player-driven progress and multiple endings. They say that Dream Zones and Deviants will evolve as the scenario progresses, presenting ever-changing challenges. They say that as metahumans eliminate eternal dreamers, they are going to reduce the durations of Phase 1 to 5, which is going to intensify the scenario's pace and difficulty. They say that your collective efforts to purge the eternal dreamers will also decide the world's fate. Will the world be saved, or will you witness its ultimate destruction? The outcome rests entirely in your hands. So it does kind of seem like this is going to be another timed scenario here where what you collect mostly gets shifted off into this middle ground where you're holding it in a storage. Think the bank inside of Dune Awakening if you were to take like a long break or something like that. And then you can pull it out when you move into another scenario at a certain cost. It's weird how they balance all this. If you don't know anything about Once Human and you're just jumping in, like, this is going to be a bit of a shock. It's a bit strange how they decided to balance their whole scenario system. But I do also know that they were starting to lean in towards more permanent scenarios. So it's entirely possible that some of these end up being permanent. I'm not entirely sure. It's been a while since I've covered this game. Let me know down in the comments if you happen to know. But let's go ahead and move on into the Raid Zone, which is going to be the PvP scenario coming in this new update. They say that Raid Zone provides an unrestricted PvP survival experience in an open world where, in the wild, everyone is both hunter and prey. Raid Zone is a spin-off for players seeking pure and intense PvP action. Delve into the Raid Zone and fight to survive. They go into a little bit more detail here, and they say that all characters start on equal footing with no inherited supplies, blueprints, or mods. They go on to say that Raid Zone also features dedicated equipment and skill trees designed for competitive play. All weapons and armor must be acquired within the game realm, perfect for players who prefer a pure PvP experience. Almost a bit of a Rust server, if you will. They say that hardcore PvP is also active, where in this hostile world, nowhere is safe. Your territory structures can be destroyed by rival metahumans, and you remain vulnerable to attacks even when you're offline. Plunder is the law of the land, and defeat means losing your gear and supplies. To survive, you must band together with allies to fortify your territory with defensive installations and traps. Stockpile weapons, ammunition, and explosives to raid rival territories. It's really like a Rust style server that they're going for here, and honestly, I just don't think it's gonna work. You know, it works in Rust, so maybe I'm wrong. You're gonna get your Zergs in here, you're gonna get your cheaters in here. Maybe there's like an offshoot spawn of like moderated community servers, your duos, your trios, whatever. Honestly, it's possible that they end up pulling something like that off, because the combat inside of Once Human isn't bad. The PvP is a bit strange, but they could have easily balanced all of that. I'm looking at it from a perspective of about 6 months ago, right? So it's entirely possible that something like this ends up popping off, especially because, like I said, the PvE inside of Once Human is insane. Definitely head and shoulders above the competition when it comes to creativity. Obviously, it still has that like survival jank to it. Overall, looking at all of this, I'm excited to be jumping back into Once Human to experience a brand new scenario rather than like a repeat scenario. I know that they also have a couple of other PvE scenarios that they had planned to be in development. I'm not sure how far along those are, or if they've gotten scrapped or what exactly, but maybe now that they're coming out with something new, we'll start diving back into the Once Human network of information and we'll figure all of that out. Let me know down in the comments if you guys happen to know. One of them was like talking about using your deviants, your deviations as like a Pokemon almost, and battling them against other players. Sounded like an interesting twist on the whole gameplay loop here. When this scenario launches, we're going to be jumping in live right here on YouTube as well as on Twitch, where we're going to be taking a little bit more casual than we did inside of our Dune Awakening speedrun day one playthrough. I'll have a link to the Twitch down in the description if you're interested in that. If you made it this far in the video, comment made it down below so I can give you an extra shout out. But other than that, I hope you guys all have an amazing day. I'm out.